G'day, g'day, g'day. Mathematical KM here, or Keith Malumbi. Their initials, not a title. This is round 6 of the Canberra Cup, played at the Canberra Chess Club. Playing Daniel Simpson, and I'm weighing in at 14.57, so we're up a bit from the previous month, and it's going to be another Hippo. The Hippo visiting London. So let's just go through. As those of you who have watched a number of mine, the order's changed a little bit. When a bishop comes out here, you've got to give the matching pawn. So just changing the order, but still the same standard first 10 moves of the old water horse or hippopotamus. And here we are, the breather moment. I pointed out to Daniel, who wasn't that familiar with the hippo, that I could almost go home now. Well, not really, but that is the full thick-skinned hippo right there. And thinking about what to do from this point, one of our favourites, the wing pawn push, is completely not on. If I move this pawn, this bishop is going to snack. If I move this pawn, this bishop is going to snack. So the wing pawn pushes are out. There's something like that really activates his London bishop. I don't really want to open up the middle. White's castled, I haven't. It's a possibility, it does come, and this one's out because he takes, I take, he takes. I go down a pawn. Not to mention, I mean it's even, but I don't really want to get rid of those rooks. This one's a possibility, but would just probably back it up. Is there anything better? So we've got get those knights moving. Let's have a look at which one of those looks like it could be up to some good. And what I was thinking even at this stage is identifying a weakness in what you're facing, and then the hippo to go the counter-attack. Not sure if I even ever get this pawn, but I identified the c3 pawn as hanging, and it would be nice to have a knight that could take it, and if a knight was placed here, it would also be threatening White's best bishop. So the bishop's likely to move. If the bishop moves, then at this stage you'd be snapping up that c pawn, and even from there you're threatening the queen. Things can change. But that double threat, probably get the bishop to move, get the pawn, or if something is done to protect the pawn, then we can trade a knight for a bishop, see what happens. Now I do know that if I get a knight here, that could be traded for a bishop, but I don't really want to be taking back. Well, I wouldn't be taking back with the pawn. I could take with the bishop and keep my bishop on that diagonal, but then the whole plan's gone out the window. So the thinking that I've got is, okay, this knight can get there. If I move my d knight, he can get there. So if the bishop takes, then I can take back with a knight and move on with that plan. If it all works in a particular way, I might even I might lose 2 knights but gain 2 bishops, which keep the bishop pair. The bishops are the heart of the hippo, even though you use the knights in tricky ways. Let's see. So knight straight to my plan. Knight to d5 was best. Right, it's called an inaccuracy, but hold your horses, computer. Now I've got 2 knights that can go to d5. It's a mistake. It does mean if that knight moves anywhere, then the queen will be a defender of that pawn. So that's not the world's worst move that's just been made there. But it's some way away from my little plan, so I enact it. And even though it was an inaccuracy getting that knight out there, now apparently it's the best move, moving that knight here. So, knight to d5. So it's at this point that Daniel has to... Is he prepared to swap this knight for that bishop? And is it damaging his pawn structure? Well, it's giving him doubled pawns, but it's also giving him a half-open file of his queen looking straight at my king. Not the world's worst. That could convince me to castle should that come up. You often castle quite late in the Hippo once you see where your opponent's attack is going to end up being. But let's see, what does Daniel come up with? Well, he didn't like that knight there, and I guess that was the lesser of his 2 bishops. And I take back. So we've reset, just there's no bishop there and no knight here. But we've got the same, threatening that pawn, threatening that bishop. What will white do? It's interesting. He could have gone absolutely anywhere else, and rook to c1, using a rook to give some protection to that the weak pawn at the back of the chains was the best move. But having brought this knight forwards, going forwards not backwards, I'll give him that. But apparently g5, which just allows that bishop to go backwards, g5 was best by some amount. The way I was looking at this was, if I threaten this knight, he can go backwards. If he does, I'll win my original pawn. He can't come here, can't come here, can't come here, can't come here. So his choices, am I to threaten this knight? His choices are back, allowing me to win the pawn that this whole little mini skirmish has been about. Or he can go there. And if he goes there, then this bishop can't go there. There'll be a knight there. Can't go here, can't go here. So at that point, g5. And hopefully g5 then will win me a piece. So that's what I'm thinking. So it's called good. Apparently not quite as good as just g5 to start with, but we've encouraged the knight to move. And knight to g3 is better. I won't win that c pawn. That's his best move. And played. Now the best move for me now is g5, so that's the plan. Will we end up winning a piece? Let's see. So now the best move for white, and it's a good resource to find, and he's found it, best by at least a whole point of eval, is knight to h5. Why is it so good? Threatening a hanging bishop, and providing an escape square for that bishop. So, if I was to just take his bishop now, he'd take mine, And what's more, it would come with check. That's really not, super good for me. So my task right now is to protect the bishop and, if at all possible, keep this square covered. And I think you can see that the best move, queen to e7, is played. Now that bishop is covered. Sure, it does allow, at this stage, white could takes, bishop moves back. Probably his bishop's still kind of a bit trapped in there, and I could bring some more pawns forward, who knows, but it's not an obvious piece win immediately. So that could have been the best thing. Or even just bishop g3 right now, because right now that knight is not threatened. So this is perhaps where the wheels fell off a little. I mean, I'm up plus 1.7, which is entirely positional. It's not any material. But the bishop back now, and then if I was to, threaten the knight couldn't go back there, it can't go here, I might win the knight. It's getting a little bit discombobulated in there for white, but the best move right now is bishop to g3. Second best is, as I said, just swapping that knight off because it's got problems, and then bishop g3. So they were the best two options, were swap the knight off and then move the bishop back, or just move the bishop back right now. So if Daniel's watching this one, this is the key moment, really. I mean, you can look at what got it to here, but it's getting out of this slightly discombobulated area. And third best is c4, which is introducing another threat. And if I, say for example, end up taking the bishop with my knight, you could take back, and this knight's not under threat. So that's three different ways to looking at this position to sneak out with a few trades and not damaging your pawn structure, and maybe even doing a little to mine. So anyway, let's take a look. And it's given as a mistake, not a blunder, but a mistake. And it kind of is. And I'm not sure if it was sort of what Daniel was thinking, but maybe he was thinking along the lines of, because you'd think it's going to be the pawn taking the bishop. Pawn takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. That's even. And then nothing else is under threat anywhere. That knight can move back, or can't move back there if I've got a pawn here. It could even take my pawn that's there. So it would be white would gain 4 points material, and black would lose 3. But this is the analysis of the position calculation from my point of view. Black's move now. So I've seen that taking with the pawn is a bit of a no-go. That's not on. The queen's protecting that pawn that I was initially gunning for. But if I go about this mess this way, knight takes bishop. The only way you can take back is with the knight, and then pawn takes knight. And so I win the 2 minor pieces, and white only gets the 1. And then from there, if I can just go trades are good, keep things even, eventually should be able to grind out a win with the black pieces. So let's take a look at what actually happened. It's given as a great move, maybe because pawn takes was really not good. Knight takes is still the best move for white, and that means, and there we go. So now we're at plus 3.6. So if I can play out the game just making good moves, then it should end up being a victory for the black pieces. So he takes, I take. It's at this point is another thing for Daniel's still working on getting his first FIDE ratings. I think it's his 4th game. He'll have one soon. It's always going to be hard when you're down by that piece, but things to think about. The player who's up thinks trades are good because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces versus 4 pieces is a lot more even than 1 piece versus 0 pieces. So you kind of want to keep the pieces on the board. And you can see your best choice here is queen to d2, keeping the ladies on. Second best, queen to d1. Third best, queen to b1. The computer is serious about wanting white to try and keep it as 5 versus 4, try and win some pawns, try and even the material. Something might happen. So having said all of that, was quite even right up until that tactical win for the black pieces winning a piece. But at this stage, it's black that should be looking to do the even trades. Check, king comes across, not back. I've moved across, not back, because now I've connected my rooks. Keeping it as closed as possible over here is what I want at the moment. The computer might like A takes B5 the most, but for a human, just keeping this area of the board sealed up makes far more sense to me. And okay, I can see planning on working on that loose pawn there. But you've always got to go through not only what is the piece going to be doing, but what was the piece doing. It was the guard for the knight, and the knight is under threat, so the knight needed to keep his guard. So, and I understand what it feels like when you've gone down the piece, and it can lead to making errors follow errors sometimes. Just when it's hard to keep the same positive, good attitude once you've gone down that piece. But so playing with the black pieces, I've seen the guard shift. So I've snapped up that knight, move the rook across. I take a pawn. You take. A nice little formation for a bishop and a pawn. Bishop protects the pawn, pawn protects the bishop. There's no doubled up anythings to sort of, that's a pretty good defensive resource I've got right there. Okay, the rook's trying to sneak in and infiltrate. And this square is available. Can't take the bishop, can't take the pawn. Pawn stopping that one. Only square I've really got to think about. And the other, I mentioned this to Daniel after the game, is if your opponent's got bishops, even if he's just got a dark bishop, and you've got something like rooks, you really, really should always take a look at, if you're going to put 2 rooks on the same diagonal, be very careful of where that dark bishop is. Now I can't get that dark bishop to there in one move, But not only does that stop this rook from coming in, that's the danger square. You've really got to move one of those rooks off that diagonal so this bishop can't line up on them both and claim one of them. So the pawn forward's interesting, but again, one of those rooks is going to fall. And there we go. I suspect, I mean, it's not a large difference, but knowing that one of the rooks is going to fall, perhaps this rook to here so that you win the bishop back and go only go down the exchange. Rook C to F1, yeah, second best. Or what was your best move here? Interesting, King F2. Rook times E4. Just claiming a bishop. Which is what you'd get back anyway. So, but rook there. That rook was claimed. Now, everything I just said about watching for two pieces on the same diagonal when your opponent's got a bishop of that colour, now it's the king and the rook that's on the same diagonal, and that's the danger square. So in and of itself, I don't think I got mate in 5, probably a bit more methodical. But taking the pawn looks okay, but it allows the bishop to the danger square. Now the rook can't move. King moves to free the pin. Bishop takes it. So now it's just pawns versus two rooks and a bishop. So let's just see how accurately or well I can put this one away. Line up the rook on the king and that pawn. He makes the best move. You're at -8. Now I take the pawn with the bishop. He moves the pawn forward. Now this rook is keeping the king out of there. The pawns are stopping the king from coming in here. So the king's trapped in that rectangle. I should be able to get the other rook across and then try for some version of a ladder mate. So the king comes in as close as he can on that corner. I bring the other rook across. He makes a pawn move. So now the box, the rectangle if you will, is getting smaller. King moves. Okay, it's a bit like a ladder mate. Of course, this rook's unprotected, so that move makes sense. The mistake for beginners in black's point of view here would be rook here and then king takes rook. Wouldn't be fun. No, I need to protect that rook and arrange an interesting form of protection, zipping to the far side of the board, too far away for the king to get there. And I have noticed that this rook has got a nice square, if need be, protected by the bishop to come down. King goes down, and it's just the king cannot get close enough to prevent. He tries, and then we have the checkmate. So it was an interesting game, London system versus the Hippo. And the tactical wrestle went on, I think it was not until something like move. There was an initial skirmish on move 13, but then it really didn't take off with the captures until 17. But quite late in the game, one of the adjacent tables had completely finished and got up to walk away before we'd spilt any blood. So it was a good initial wrestle, and maybe, Daniel, you can pick up a couple of points from where you went right and where you went wrong. Let's have a last look at the review. Black found a tactic to grow their lead into a win. Yeah, once that sort of happened, it was on its way. So 80 to 90. And you played your opening well enough. Again, the initial wrestle 92 to my 90. And I'm happy to be told my middle game's at 91. It's not always. But good game, and I look forward to the next time we meet. And I'll see the rest of you guys in the next video after Monday night. Bye for now.